I was thinking about this the other day. What would I go back and tell my past self? You know, Currently, right now, in time of recording this video, I'm 32 years old. And it's like, I've been through so much in my life. And I'm not going to get into a lot of specifics here, but I do want to go over a few things where it's like, man, what would I go back and tell myself? So let's go all the way back in the day. Way, way, way back in the day. We're talking like elementary school, middle school, when I was the chunky monkey kid, getting picked on and bullied and everything like that. What would I go back and tell myself? Well, I think the same advice that I would tell myself back then is the same advice that I would tell myself, when I was around, let's say 17, 18, and I'm going to talk about that next. When I was around, let's say, 22 years old, I'm going to talk about that next. And, in my early 30s, same advice always applies. And I think, if you're somebody that's just kind of feeling down in the dumps, you're lacking some motivation or, not feeling too inspired to make a change with your life, or who knows, maybe you feel like, man, like nothing ever kind of goes my way, this same advice might be able to apply to you as well. So check this out. Way back in the day, like I said, I grew up in this Italian household, finish everything on your plate mentality, the good foods versus bad foods. And, even though I was playing sports growing up, I was still that chunky monkey kid. I specifically remember, this girl in my school taking one of those Nestle's chunky bars, throwing them at me at lunch and pretty much saying like, here, fatty, like you should have this. Like, this is yours. It has your name on it. And like that broke my heart, And the advice that I would tell myself back then is don't give up. It's going to get better. That's it. Don't give up. It's going to get better. Okay. And it did, because, that right there sucked to hear that, right? When that girl threw that at me. But it was like, sometimes the truth hurts. Sometimes like the things that hurt us the most actually helps us grow the most, and can be a blessing in disguise. And you're really going to hear more about that as I continue on. So let's fast forward now to, let's just say, around the time when, I'm 16, 17, 18 years old. Now, at this time, my lifelong dream was to be in the Marines. Okay. In fact, I was even doing the delayed entry program, and so pretty much my, junior year and my senior year in high school, I was going to what's called the Armed Forces Recruiting Station. I think it was like every other weekend. And I would be doing pretty much PT with the guys that's getting ready to ship off to boot camp. Like, that's all I wanted to be, was a Marine growing up, pretty much since 9/11 happened. And my MOS at the time that I wanted to be was 0311, which is infantry, right? Like, I wanted to be a soldier, like that was me. That's all I wanted to be. So I never actually took like the SATs to get into college or anything like that, because I'm like, man, this is my lifelong dream. I'm going to be a Marine. Like, I don't need college. I'm just going to be a soldier, Well, unfortunately, okay, and this goes all the way back to, and I'll tell you a little bit more context here, way back in the day, because if I tell you the context first, this is going to make a lot more sense, okay? Way back in the day, I had problems. I find it funny because a lot of people say I'm a good speaker. If I'm ever speaking on stage or podcast or, coaching call or mindset call with somebody, they're like, man, you know how to speak very well. Well, back in the day, I actually had to take speech class. I could not say the word yellow to save my life. Like, I remember, like, I had to go to a class to learn how to say the word yellow week after week after week. I had a hard time speaking growing up, but also I had a really difficult time in school. I don't know if you ever heard of Sylvan Learning Center. Well, I had to go through that pretty much like every single summer for multiple years to learn about math and to learn about English and all these different, ways of educating myself, because I had a really hard time in school, like a tremendous hard time in school. And one of the biggest problems that I typically still have to this day is reading comprehension, where if I'm reading something and I'm not too engaged or understanding the material too much, it's just going in one ear and out the other, okay? And, fast forward now to, let's just say, me getting ready to go off into the Marines and, go to boot camp and everything like that. You have to go through what's called MEPS first, right? So MEPS is, at the time it was like 2 hours away. We had to take a big bus to get over there. And you had to go through your physical, right? See if you're physically fit. You have to do all these weird like duck walks and everything like that. It was pretty uncomfortable. You literally had to like pee in this little cup and a guy's like right there next to you. And you also have to take your written exam. And pretty much if you passed all of these tests, you get to swear in right there. And I go down there, right? Go on the bus, right, with all the guys that, I was doing the delayed entry program with, thinking like, hey, we're all going to do this together. Well, sure enough, I failed my ASVAB test by 2 points. So I could not swear in. And it was the most heartbreaking moment of my life. I felt so miserable because it was like my life fell before my eyes. What was I going to do? Like, I'm heartbroken. Like, this is all I want to be, as a Marine. And I failed it by 2 points. And the reason why I failed is because, once again, I have a really hard time in school. And I also suffer with what's called test anxiety. So with me, if I'm taking a test, right, anything like that, this is why I hated school growing up, right? If I hear just the turning of papers and the pens and everything like that, it's like a race. I get really competitive with myself, where I'm thinking like, oh man, I'm stuck on this answer and somebody else is just blitzing through this. Next thing you know, for me, it's just like ABC, 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 right? AA, B, B, B. It's typically always more B's than A's, right? Like, I'm just coloring in the dots at that point, guessing. Because I'm like, I don't want to be last. I don't want to be that loser that's, submitting his test in late. And that caused me a lot of problems in school growing up. And so with MEPS, hey, I failed my ASVAB test because of that. A few months later, I actually reapplied and failed it again. A few months later, same thing happened. Failed it again. It was always by anywhere from like 2 to 5 points missing out. Physically fit, hey, no brainer. Mentally, though, I would always fail these ASVAB tests. So, same advice that I would tell my chunky self back in middle school, same advice I would tell, myself as I'm failing these tests and I'm heartbroken, right? Like, what am I going to do with my life? It's just like, hey, don't give up. It's going to get better. Okay, that's it, plain and simple. Now, during that time also, shortly after, this is when I was huge into MMA, all I wanted to be was, after my failed attempt of becoming a Marine, was make it as a UFC fighter, make it to the UFC, become a world champion, right? That's what I was gunning and aiming for. Well, sure enough, I never had a wrestling background or anything like that, so I had some limitations, right? I had a long way of learning the sport of mixed martial arts with the jiu-jitsu, the Muay Thai, the wrestling, the boxing, everything like that comes into play. And even though I had a quote-unquote a winning record in my amateur career and, I enjoyed it thoroughly, I kind of knew in the back of my head, like, this was not going to be for me long term. I had several different injuries in terms of, my MMA fights. Also, you don't get paid anything unless you're like top dog inside the UFC. Even the bottom ranking guys in the UFC, they don't get paid a lot. So it's like you're spending all this time, all this energy into training, everything like that, pretty much not making anything. It was great in terms of building confidence and learning how to fight to defend myself and, eventually my family if anything ever happens. But it's like, you're not really making a career unless you're, like I said, top dog. So fast forward now, right? Many, 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 years where it's like, I'm at a point right now where, early 30s, and I'm looking back and I'm like, man, in terms of me, because even though life is great, right? You got a business, you got a family, everything like that, right? You're always going to go through struggles. Everybody deals with different storms. Everybody deals with different adversity. Everybody goes through their own battles. And that's why I always say it's like you can never judge a person because you never know what they've been through and you never know what they're maybe currently going through, So in terms of what I'm going through right now, there's different, let's just say like operations, right? And different, adjustments in terms of my business model and all these different things that require a lot of time, require a lot of energy, require a lot of, thinking patterns, and just, man, it's an investment, right? It's a big investment, right? In terms of everything, financially, physically, right? Mentally, energy, everything like that, right? Just focusing on doing certain things. We're talking like long nights, everything like that. And it's like, man, I had to go through a lot, right? Growing up with the things that I just kind of shared with you. And whenever I'm kind of feeling down in the dumps, this is where I kind of build up my own confidence that I really want you to understand if you're ever going through some hardships as well. I look back at the past, right? The ones that I just kind of share with you in terms of, being overweight in middle school, hey, never making it in the Marines, a failed MMA career, if you want to call it that. Just, everything, right? There's been several times going through depression, anxiety, right? Being at the lowest ends of the lows. And I would always give myself the same advice. Don't give up. It's going to get better. And that's the same advice that I would give myself currently right now when I have these long nights and early mornings, and sometimes you can't see the goal, you can't see the vision. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors and clouds in the way, and it gets discouraging. But it's like, I know that when I get into my 40s, I'm going to be giving myself the same advice that how I was just giving myself, back when I was in middle school, back when I was in high school, which is, once again, don't give up. It's going to get better. So for you that might be listening to this right now, and maybe you're at a dark point in your life, maybe, you're just going through a lot, stress, adversity, challenges, whatever, right? Life's always going to throw curveballs. The same advice I would recommend and give to yourself. Don't give up. It's going to get better, It's only going to get a lot harder for yourself if you do give up, if you do throw in the towel, if you do quit. But I don't want you to be a quitter, because maybe you've tried quitting on several things before in the past, and that's led you to a life where maybe now you have some regrets. And at the end of the day, as you fast forward all the way through life, I know for a fact one of my biggest, things is I don't want to be on my deathbed having regrets in my life. I want to be able to at least say, hey, I tried this, and even though I failed, who cares? I at least learned something in that process, rather than, oh, I wish I would have done this, and I wish I would have got started with this, and I wish I would have actually, committed to my own actions and words and put one foot in front of the other. It's like, no, I don't want to have a life full of wishes and regrets. It's like I want to have a life full of experiences and do's and, hey, lessons that needed to be learned maybe the hard way, So once again, if you're somebody that's going through a hard time right now, don't give up. It will get better. I promise you that. It always does. Hopefully you guys got some value from today's video. If you did, definitely give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. Let me know, what is your biggest takeaway after just getting done watching this episode? And then also, if you have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, I would greatly, greatly appreciate that if you did. As always, guys, this has been Coach Joe with Heartletics.com. I will talk to you in the next episode. Peace out, Girl Scouts.